I had been a part of the intergalactic coalition for years, traveling from one world to the next, carrying out missions and observing foreign cultures. But nothing had prepared me for this. Nothing could have warned me about the storm that was about to change the course of my life forever. The moon I landed on was desolate, barren, almost lifeless in its appearance. Its surface was marked by jagged rocks and the faint remnants of an ancient civilization. This was a place where very few dared to venture, a quiet part of the galaxy, left untouched by time, forgotten by most, but not by me. I had been sent, here to gather intelligence to understand the movements of an obscure group. Instead, I found her. Her name was Ramika, a member of the Voryx race, one of the most advanced and powerful species in the known universe. Their intellect was unmatched, their technological advancements far beyond anything my people could ever dream of. But beneath their cold, imposing exterior, I had discovered something unexpected. The Voryx were bound by rules and traditions that left no room for love, no room for choice. Ramika was the epitome of that rule. Her appearance was both alien and elegant, her skin a shimmering shade of violet, her eyes glowing with a soft, ethereal light. But what struck me most was the sadness in her gaze, an unmistakable sense of loss that seemed to consume her every time she looked away from me. At first, I thought it was just a passing moment, a flicker of vulnerability that would disappear with time. But as I spent more time with her, I realized it was more than that. Ramika had been abandoned, cast aside by her own people for the one thing that the Voryx despised above all else, loving a human. I could tell she was running from something, her people, her past, her own future. The chains she wore weren't just physical, they were bound to her very soul. The Voryx had long held the belief that humans were inferior, weak, and unworthy of their time or attention. For Ramika to fall in love with me, to have even the smallest feeling for someone like me, was not just unacceptable. It was a betrayal, an offense against the very foundation of her society. Yet, I saw something in her that I couldn't ignore. A light, a flame that refused to be extinguished, even in the darkest corners of her world. She wasn't just a prisoner of her race's laws, she was a prisoner of her own heart. When I first met her, she didn't speak much. There was no need for words between us. Her eyes, her body language, told me everything I needed to know. But one day, as we sat on the edge of a rocky cliff, watching the twin moons rise in the sky, she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper, as if she feared someone might hear. "They will never accept us, you know," she said, her words heavy with the weight of something she had carried for so long. "They will never accept me for loving you." I could see the resignation in her eyes. It wasn't just defeat. It was the acceptance of a reality she had been forced to live with. She had known from the very beginning that falling for a human would lead her down a path of exile, of scorn, and of pain. She had seen others like her, others who had dared to love outside of their race, and how they had been torn apart by the very people who once called them family. "They will never forgive me," she continued, her voice trembling with the emotion she tried so hard to suppress. "And they will never let you go. You will never be free. Not as long as they know about us." I reached out, placing my hand gently on hers. I could feel the tremor in her fingers, the way her body was fighting against the desire to pull away. But she didn't. She let me hold her just for a moment, as though that brief connection was the only thing keeping her from breaking apart entirely. "Then let's make them forget," I said, my voice steady but full of the conviction I had never felt before. "Let's run. Let's leave this place and never look back." Her gaze flickered with something, hope, maybe, or disbelief. But then slowly she nodded. "I want that," she whispered, her voice barely audible against the winds. "But we both know it's impossible." "Nothing is impossible," I replied, my voice stronger now. "Not when we have each other." And in that moment, I saw it. The same spark that had drawn me to her in the first place. The same unspoken bond that had tied our fates together from the very beginning. Ramika was more than just a victim of her people's beliefs. She was a woman who, despite everything, refused to lose her humanity. Her chains weren't just physical. They were emotional, psychological, imposed by her own race, her own people. But the more I spent time with her, the more I realized that those chains weren't as strong as they seemed. Together we had the power to break free from them, to redefine what it meant to be free. But the danger was real. The Voryx didn't just kill traitors. They made an example out of them. And Ramika, in their eyes, was the greatest traitor of all. To love a human was to commit an unforgivable sin. To choose me over them was to betray everything she had ever known. I knew that. If we were to survive, we had to leave. But leaving was no simple task. The Voryx had eyes everywhere, and they would stop at nothing to hunt us down, to reclaim Ramika and punish her for her defiance. But I couldn't imagine a life without her. I couldn't bear the thought of her being forced back into their cold, unyielding world where love was a crime. I had already made my decision. As the days passed, we planned, plotted, and made our preparations. Every moment was filled with uncertainty. Every step we took could be our last. But we had one thing no one else could take from us, our determination to be together. The night had fallen heavy over the barren moon, the twin moons casting an eerie light over the cracked, dusty surface below. Everything was still, save for the soft, whispering winds that carried the scent of alien flora. The world was silent, but it was the kind of silence that felt like the calm before the storm, a storm I knew was coming for us. I had always believed in planning, in precision. As an operative for the Intergalactic Coalition, I was trained to think ahead, to anticipate every move, every outcome. But standing there beside Ramika, with only the cold moonlight for company, I realized that nothing could have prepared me for this. No amount of strategy or training could have prepared me for the feeling of holding her hand, knowing that in a matter of hours we would be forced to run, not just from her people, but from everything we had ever known. "We can't stay here much longer," Ramika said, her voice a mixture of fear and determination. She was looking at the horizon, where the silhouette of the distant mountains stood against the night sky. I could feel the tension in her, the weight of the decision she had made. This wasn't just an escape for her. It was a betrayal of everything she had been taught. To her people, to her family, to everything she once held dear, she was now an outcast. "I know," I replied, my voice calm but heavy with the weight of the truth. "We leave tonight. As soon as the transport is ready, we'll go." But I could see the doubt in her eyes. It was hard to escape when the enemy had eyes in every shadow, ears in every whisper. The Voryx didn't just operate as a species. They were a collective. Their very culture demanded loyalty, and for Ramika to defy that loyalty, to love a human, was the ultimate sin. "Are you sure we can make it?" she asked, her gaze locking with mine. There was a vulnerability in her eyes that she had kept hidden for so long, but now it was out in the open. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "We've already come this far." But even as I said it, I knew the danger we faced. We had planned everything meticulously, right down to the escape route, the supply drops, and the coordinates for the hidden transport shuttle that would take us beyond the reach of the Voryx Empire. But nothing in the galaxy could guarantee that we would escape unharmed. The Voryx were everywhere, and once they knew Ramika was gone, nothing would stop them from hunting us down. The plan was simple. Get to the transport shuttle in the dead of night, with no lights, no noise, and no sign of our passage. We had no room for mistakes, no margin for error. Every second counted. We had 1 hour before the Voryx patrols would make their rounds, 1 hour before they would sweep the area and find us. There was no time to waste. The transport shuttle was hidden in a cave on the other side of the planet, far from the prying eyes of the Voryx. But to get there, we had to cross miles of rough terrain, risking detection at every step. As I prepared to leave, I felt a pang of guilt. Guilt for the people I was leaving behind, for the mission I was abandoning. I had been trained to put duty above all else, to follow orders, to serve the coalition without question. But in that moment, none of that mattered. I looked at Ramika, and I knew that she was the only thing that mattered now. "We stick to the plan," I said. "We go through the canyon and then we head straight for the cave. I'll make sure no one sees us." Ramika nodded, her face resolute. But there was something else in her eyes, something deeper than the fear, something that seemed to hint at her true feelings. "You're sure about this?" she asked softly. "You're sure you're doing this for me? For us?" I smiled at her, but it was a smile laced with both certainty and sadness. "I'm doing this because you deserve a life, Ramika, a life beyond the chains they've tried to bind you with. You deserve to be free." She reached up and touched my face, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the lines of my cheek. The touch was tender, almost as if she was trying to memorize the feel of me, to hold on to this moment as though it might slip away. "I don't know what will happen when we leave," she whispered, "but I know one thing. I'll never regret it. No matter what happens, I'll never regret choosing you." Her words hit me like a wave, and for a moment I felt the enormity of the journey we were about to undertake. We weren't just running from the Voryx. We were running from everything. The lives we had known, the worlds we had once believed were ours to control. But what choice did we have? The moment Ramika chose me, everything changed. I took her hand, pulling her close, and kissed her forehead. "Then let's go," I said. "We'll make it through this. Together." We began to move, making our way through the shadows, our every step deliberate, our hearts racing with the same mixture of hope and fear. The moonlit landscape stretched out before us, an unforgiving desert of sharp rocks and jagged cliffs. It was a world that seemed to be waiting for us to make our move, a world that would either embrace us or destroy us. As we crossed the first stretch of open ground, I heard the faint hum of a distant engine, a Voryx patrol, no doubt. My pulse quickened as I pulled Ramika closer to me, urging her to move faster. We couldn't afford to be caught. Not now. Not when we were so close. We reached the canyon's edge in record time, our hearts pounding in our chests, but the first real test was just ahead. The canyon walls loomed tall on either side of us, casting long shadows over the narrow path. We had to keep our pace steady, keep our movements quiet, and pray that the patrol wouldn't spot us. It was a moment of pure tension, each footfall echoing in the still air, each second dragging on longer than the last. But we kept moving, silently and swiftly, as if our very lives depended on the silence, and they did. It was only a matter of time before our luck ran out. The quiet hum of the transport shuttle's engines had been the only sound for hours as we made our way across the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the moon. The canyon, our only escape route, seemed to stretch on forever, its jagged rocks casting long shadows across the path ahead. Each step we took felt like a countdown, a race against time. The shuttle was just ahead, hidden deep in a cave as we had planned. But as we neared the entrance, something shifted in the air, a chill that sent a wave of unease over me. It wasn't just the cold or the creeping shadows of the canyon, it was the feeling that we were being watched. Ramika, always so alert, must have sensed it too. She stopped in her tracks, her eyes darting around the rocky walls. I followed her gaze but saw nothing, just the flicker of moonlight on the distant rocks. But that was enough to make my heart race. "Something's wrong," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. I nodded. "Keep moving. Stay close." We pressed on, though every step now felt more deliberate, more weighted with the knowledge that we were not alone. The Voryx had an uncanny ability to track down their own, no matter how well hidden they were. The moment Ramika left her people's domain, I knew they would be after us, but I had hoped we would have more time before they discovered our plan. Then, just as we reached the cave entrance, the trap sprung. "Stop right there!" A voice barked from behind us. We spun around, hearts pounding, and there they were. Voryx soldiers dressed in their sleek black armor, their faces obscured by dark visors. There were 3 of them, standing tall and unyielding, weapons drawn, and pointed at us. The leader, a towering figure with sharp features and cold eyes, stepped forward. You thought you could escape? He sneered. You thought the Voryx would let one of their own leave without consequence? I drew my own weapon instinctively, but Ramika's hand shot out, stopping me before I could make a move. Her face was a mixture of disbelief and sorrow, her eyes meeting mine with an almost apologetic look. They were always going to find us, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want this. I never wanted this to happen. I wanted to ask her what she meant, what she had done, but before I could speak, the Voryx leader raised a hand. You know what's going to happen now, don't you? He asked Ramika, his voice dripping with disdain. You're a traitor. You've betrayed your people, your family, and everything we stand for. Your punishment will be severe. Ramika didn't flinch. She stood tall, her gaze steady as she looked at the soldiers, but I could see the cracks forming beneath her calm exterior. This was no longer about running from the Voryx. This was about facing them, about accepting the consequences of her choices. I knew this would happen, she said, her voice trembling now. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to betray my people, but I couldn't stay and watch them destroy everything we had. I couldn't stay and watch as they treated me like a prisoner. The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in the eyes of the Voryx soldiers. The leader seemed to hesitate for just a second before he spoke again. You think your defiance will go unpunished? He said, his voice low and dangerous. The Voryx do not forgive. Betrayal. Before I could react, Ramika stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. I know what will happen, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that clung to her words. I'm ready to face the consequences. I reached out for her, but the soldiers moved in quickly, grabbing her arms and pulling her away from me. Her eyes locked with mine for a brief moment, and I saw the pain in them. The same pain I had seen when we first met. She was about to lose everything, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Ramika! I shouted, struggling to break, free from the soldiers who had moved to restrain me, but she was already gone, dragged away by the soldiers as they headed back toward their transport. I had lost her, again. We were taken to an isolated facility deep within the heart of the Voryx stronghold where they planned to make an example of Ramika. As we were escorted inside, the cold, sterile walls of the compound seemed to close in on us, suffocating any sense of hope I had left. The Voryx leader, whose name I had yet to learn, threw me into a dark holding cell, shackling my arms to the cold metal bars. Ramika was placed in a separate room, though I could hear her muffled voice through the walls. She was pleading with them, begging for mercy. But mercy was something the Voryx had long ago abandoned. As the hours passed, I could only think of one thing, her. What had happened? Why had she surrendered so willingly? What was it that had pushed her to make this decision? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her betrayal, something she hadn't told me. In the dead of night, I was roused by the sound of footsteps. The door to my cell opened, and I was greeted by the cold, impassive face of the Voryx leader. You'll be transferred to another holding cell, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. Your presence is no longer required here. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I knew the truth. The Voryx weren't going to keep me alive for much longer. I had outlived my usefulness. But as I was led down the cold, endless corridors of the compound, something in the back of my mind told me that Ramika wasn't finished yet. She wouldn't give up, not without a fight, and neither would I. The air inside the Voryx stronghold was thick with tension, its cold walls echoing the weight of our fates. I'd been thrown into a solitary chamber, awaiting what I knew was inevitable. The trial. It was the only way the Voryx knew how to handle those who defied their laws, those who betrayed their kind. But in my heart, I wasn't thinking about the trial itself. I wasn't even thinking about my fate. All I could think about was Ramika, what she was going through, what she was feeling as they prepared to tear her apart piece by piece. I hadn't seen her since they dragged her away from me. The silence between us had only grown heavier with each passing minute, each passing hour. There was no way to know what she was facing, what kind of pain they were inflicting on her. I could only pray that she remained strong, that she wouldn't break under the weight of the Voryx judgment, and then the door to my cell opened again. The same Voryx leader, the one whose cold eyes had watched us as we were captured, entered. This time he was accompanied by 2 guards, each as imposing and silent as the walls that surrounded us. "Get up," he commanded. His voice was like ice, devoid of any emotion. I didn't move immediately. I stood there, waiting for the inevitable. The last few moments with Ramika had been all-consuming, and now this trial felt like a blur of distant noise. It felt surreal. Was this how it was supposed to end? Was this the cost of loving someone from a world so different from my own? The leader's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Move!" he barked. The guard seized me by the arms, dragging me from my cell and down the sterile, brightly lit corridors. My mind raced as we moved. Was Ramika being taken to the same room? Were they going to break her before she had the chance to speak? I had no answers. I had no idea what was coming. The doors to the trial chamber opened with a resounding thud, and I was shoved inside. The room was vast, its high ceilings and marble floors giving it the air of a grand hall. But beneath the grandeur, there was an underlying coldness, an unspoken sense of finality. The Voryx Council, the ruling body of her people, sat at the far end of the room. They were arrayed in a semicircle, their eyes glowing faintly with the energy that pulsed through their bodies. They were the ones who held the power over life and death, and now it was my turn to face them. Ramika was already there, standing at the center of the room, her arms bound, her head held high despite the chains that draped over her. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting second, and I saw the familiar sadness there, the same sadness I had seen the first time I met her. But beneath that sadness was something else. It was the resolve of a woman who had made her choice, who had made her peace with the road ahead. She didn't speak, but the way her eyes locked with mine spoke volumes. She was telling me not to be afraid, not to give up. She was still fighting, even if it seemed like all hope was lost. The leader of the council stood, his tall figure looming over the room like a shadow. He was older than the others, his skin worn and cracked, his hair streaked with silver. His eyes glowed with a cold, calculating light as he addressed Ramika. "Ramika," he began, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You have committed the highest offense any Voryx could ever commit. You have betrayed us all. You have chosen a human over your own people." His words cut through the air like a blade. I could see Ramika's fists clench at her sides, but she remained silent, her head held high. "You have dishonored your family," the council leader continued. "You have dishonored the very foundation of our society. You have chosen to leave us, to embrace a future of weakness, and for that, you must be punished." I stepped forward, my voice rising as I spoke, unable to remain silent any longer. "Punished?" I shouted. "For loving someone? For choosing to live? Is that what you call justice?" The room fell into an eerie silence, and I could feel the eyes of the council turning toward me. The leader's gaze hardened, his lip curling in disdain. "Human," he spat, his tone venomous. "You have no place in this trial. Your presence here is an insult to the Voryx." But I didn't back down. I couldn't. I had spent far too long watching the injustice unfold in front of me. Ramika had done nothing wrong. She had only followed her heart, the one thing the Voryx had tried so hard to suppress. Ramika, however, stepped forward, breaking her silence. "I made my choice," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "I chose love. I chose freedom." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I could feel the tension rise, could see the wheels turning in the minds of the Voryx Council. They hadn't expected this kind of defiance from her. The leader's eyes narrowed and he gestured to the guards. "Take them both," he commanded. At once the guards moved forward, their hands gripping my arms. But before they could drag us away, the council leader raised a hand to stop them. "Wait," he said, his voice suddenly calm. There is one final decision to be made. Ramika's eyes locked with mine again, and for a brief moment, it felt as though everything had come to a halt. I knew what was coming. I knew the price she would pay for defying her people. The punishment for betrayal is death, the leader said, his voice cold. But there are those among us who believe that mercy must be shown in rare cases. My heart raced, and I could see Ramika's gaze shift. The room held its breath as the leader continued. If she proves her loyalty to the Voryx, we will consider sparing her life. If she gives up this human, if she chooses to return to us, then perhaps she will be allowed to live. The offer was a mockery. It wasn't about loyalty. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was a test to see how much she would sacrifice for the sake of her people. They knew she would never choose them again, and neither would I, Ramika's. Lips parted as if she were about to speak, but her words were not the ones the Voryx had expected. I will not give up my humanity, she said, her voice unwavering, her face resolute. And I will not betray him. The room fell silent, and with that, the trial was over. The decision had been made, and the Voryx were not known for mercy. As the sentence of death was pronounced, I felt a cold surge of terror rip through me. I had failed her. No amount of strategy, no amount of hope could have prepared me for the crushing realization that Ramika, my Ramika, was about to be lost to me forever. I could hear her voice, steady but filled with sorrow, as she spoke the final words that sealed her fate. I will not give up my humanity, and I will not betray him. The guards moved forward, their cold hands grasping her arms, and I felt a wave of panic rush over me. How could I let this happen? How could I stand by while they took her away, sentenced her to an eternity of suffering? But in that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized that I could not and would not allow her to die for her choices. She had chosen love. She had chosen freedom. And it was time for me to do the same. I will not let you take her, I shouted, my voice cracking through the tense silence. The Voryx leader turned to me, his eyes narrowing in annoyance. You have no power here, human, he said, his tone dripping with disdain. I had no power, no authority in the court of the Voryx. But what I had was determination. I had something they could never understand. Love. The kind of love that makes a person capable of anything, no matter the odds. The leader raised his hand, signaling to the guards to pull Ramika away. Take them both to the holding cells. We will deal with them later. The cold metal of the guards' hands gripped my arms, dragging me away from Ramika. I struggled, my body burning with adrenaline, but I knew it was futile. I could see the terror in Ramika's eyes as they led her away from me, and I knew that if I didn't act now, she would be lost forever. But the guards had underestimated one thing: my ability to think on my feet, to act with precision when the time came. I had spent years as an operative, learning how to read people, how to predict outcomes. And now, that training was about to save her life. As we were escorted down a long corridor, I subtly reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing the cold surface of the small device I had hidden there. It was a tracker, a last-minute addition to our plan in case things went wrong. The Voryx were thorough, but they were not infallible. They hadn't checked us thoroughly when they captured us. They hadn't realized that I had prepared for this moment. I activated the tracker, sending a signal to the shuttle. It was hidden in the cave, just as planned. If everything went according to plan, the shuttle would be able to intercept us before the Voryx could take us any farther into their stronghold. The guards dragged us into the holding cells, and I was thrown into one while Ramika was locked away, in a separate one. The air was cold, and the walls seemed to close in around me as I watched her disappear down the hall, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness. I couldn't lose her. Not like this. I waited in the silence, heart pounding in my chest, every second feeling like an eternity. The only thing keeping me going was the knowledge that we had one shot at freedom. If the shuttle didn't arrive in time, we would both be lost. But if it did, if it came to our rescue, we had a chance. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours, before I heard the faint hum of the shuttle's engines in the distance. My heart skipped a beat, but I knew we had little time. I reached up to the bars of my cell, my hands shaking with urgency. The guards were still at their posts, unaware of the impending danger. It was now or never. Just as I was about to make my move, the door to my cell opened. A figure stepped inside, a shadow, a familiar presence. My heart surged as I realized who it was. "Get up," a voice whispered, low and urgent. It was the pilot of the shuttle. A member of the coalition who had been tracking our escape route from the beginning. "You're running out of time," he added, his eyes scanning the hallway. "The shuttle's ready. We have to move, now." Without another word, I followed him, my body moving on pure instinct. We made our way through the maze of corridors, silent as ghosts. We reached the holding cells where Ramika was being held. My pulse quickened as we approached her cell, and I saw her, standing there, her face as calm as ever, despite everything she had been through. I unlocked her cell with the small device the pilot had given me, and the door creaked open. "Ramika," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Her eyes flickered with recognition, and then relief. She took a step toward me, but before we could embrace, I heard the sound of footsteps. The Voryx were coming. "Quick," the pilot urged. "We have no time!" I grabbed Ramika's hand, pulling her with me as we ran. We had no plan now, only the instinct to survive, to escape, to be free. The shuttle was our only hope, and we had to reach it before the Voryx could close in on us. We reached the back door of the compound, where the shuttle was hidden. The engines roared to life as we climbed aboard, the doors sealing behind us. I glanced out the window as we lifted off, the familiar landscape of the Voryx stronghold growing smaller and smaller in the distance. We were free, but as we flew into the unknown, my heart remained heavy. We had escaped, but our journey was far from over. The Voryx would not give up so easily. We would be hunted for the rest of our lives. But as I looked at Ramika, I knew that as long as we were together, nothing else mattered. We were free, and that was all that counted. The stars outside the shuttle window were distant, cold, and unyielding, just like the endless challenges we would face. But for the first time since we had met, I could feel something other than fear. We had escaped the Voryx stronghold. The shuttle carried us far from their reach, but we both knew that this was only a temporary reprieve. The Voryx were relentless. They wouldn't stop until they had us. Our names, our faces, our defiance, everything would be a mark on us, a beacon, for them to hunt us down. We were fugitives now, outlaws in the vast expanse of space, constantly on the run. We sat in the dimly lit cabin of the shuttle, the hum of the engines a constant reminder of the danger we were in. Ramika sat across from me, her gaze lost in the distance, her hands gripping the armrest as if she were still trying to find her balance in this new reality. "I thought I was prepared for everything," she said quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of pain, a quiet desperation that I had never heard before. But nothing could have prepared me for this. I moved closer to her, sitting beside her and gently placing my hand on hers. "You're not alone anymore," I said softly, the weight of my words sinking in. "We'll face this together, no matter what comes." Ramika's eyes met mine, her expression unreadable. There was fear there, but also something else, a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her heart beat a little stronger, to make her realize that she wasn't running alone anymore. "I don't know if we can outrun them," she whispered, her voice barely audible against the hum of the shuttle. "I don't know if I can outrun them. My own people." Her words struck me like a physical blow. The Voryx were more than just an enemy. They were her people, her family, her entire world. She had been born among them, raised in a society that dictated every aspect of her life. Her defiance, her choice to love me, had severed her from that world, and now, no matter where we ran, she would never be able to return. "You don't have to outrun them," I said, my voice firm, despite the uncertainty in my chest. We'll fight. We'll stand our ground. Her eyes widened slightly as she looked at me, and I could see a flicker of disbelief there. Fight? Against the Voryx? You don't understand, Javan. They are unstoppable. Their army, I don't care how many they have, I interrupted, my heart pounding in my chest. We have something they don't. We have each other. There was a long silence between us as Ramika processed my words. I knew she didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to accept the fact that we could ever win against an enemy as powerful as the Voryx. But the truth was, we didn't need to fight with their weapons or their technology. We didn't need to fight their way. What we had, what we could use to our advantage, was our bond, our shared will to survive, and the fact that neither of us was willing to surrender. I can't go back, Ramika whispered, more to herself than to me. I can't go back to that life. I can't let them break me again. I squeezed her hand gently. And you won't. We'll never go back. But we have to stay ahead of them. For the first time since we left the Voryx stronghold, I saw a spark of something in Ramika's eyes. Something that told me she was starting to believe it too. That we could do this. That we could survive. Not just escape, but fight for our future. For freedom. We'll need allies, I said, breaking the silence as the shuttle began to glide through the stars. We can't do this alone. Ramika looked up at me, her eyes dark but resolute. You're right. We need to build an army of our own. I nodded, knowing the weight of what we were about to do. We couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later, the Voryx would catch up with us. But if we could find people who shared our cause, people who understood what it meant to be free, we might just have a fighting chance. Do you have a plan? She asked, her voice steady now, filled with the same determination I felt rising in me. I stood up and moved to the cockpit, the small console lighting up as I sat in the pilot's seat. I activated the map of the galaxy, my mind already calculating the next steps in our escape. We had to keep moving, stay one step ahead of the Voryx. And if we could make it to the outer rim, there was a small chance we could find refuge with the rebels, a scattered network of resistance groups that had been working to overthrow oppressive regimes for years. I have a few ideas, I said, glancing back at her with a half smile. But first, we need to get to the edge of the galaxy. The Voryx won't have as much influence there. As I plotted the course, I heard Ramika moving behind me. She came up to the console, her fingers lightly touching the screen, her eyes scanning the map. The outer rim, she murmured. That's where they hide. I turned to her, sensing the shift in her voice. Are you ready for this? Ramika met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something other than fear. I saw resolve. I was born ready, but now I fight for something worth living for. And just like that, I knew that this wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about more than evading the Voryx. This was about standing up for a future that had been stolen from us. We weren't just escaping the past. We were building a future. A future where we would be free to live, to love, without fear. With a steady hand, I set the coordinates and engaged the hyperdrive. The shuttle shot forward, breaking through the stars like a comet on fire, leaving the Voryx far behind for now. But as we sailed into the unknown, I knew one thing for sure. The fight had only just begun. The journey was long, but for the first time in what felt like forever, the weight on my chest started to lighten. The stars outside the shuttle window were distant, vast, and filled with the promise of a new beginning. Ramika and I had been on the run for weeks now, each passing day a blur of near misses, dodging patrols and surviving on whatever resources we could scrape together. But now, as the shuttle streaked through the vast expanse of the galaxy, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel before: hope. The Voryx were relentless, and we knew they would never stop searching for us. But for the first time, I could see a way forward, a path that wasn't dictated by fear or running. It was a path that could lead to something better, something we could build together. The outer rim was our best hope. It was a region of the galaxy far from the center of Voryx control, where the oppressed, the downtrodden, and the rebellious gathered in secret. There were whispers of rebel groups, organizations that had long been fighting against oppressive empires, including the Voryx. If we could find them, we could join forces. With their help, we could form an alliance strong enough to challenge the Voryx. As we approached the coordinates I had set for the rebel base, I turned to Ramika, who had been silently staring at the stars, lost in her thoughts. She had grown, quieter over the past few weeks, as if the weight of everything that had happened was finally catching up with her. "Ramika," I said softly, breaking the silence. "We're almost there." She turned to me, her eyes wide, as if she hadn't realized how much time had passed. For a moment, I could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear she had carried with her all along. But now, beneath that fear, there was something else, something softer. It was the flicker of hope that I had seen growing in her every day, even when she didn't acknowledge it. "I'm not sure what will happen when we get there," she said quietly, her voice heavy with uncertainty. "What if they don't accept us? What if they don't trust us?" I moved closer to her, reaching out to take her hand. "We don't need them to trust us. We need to show them we're willing to fight for something worth fighting for. This isn't just about running anymore. It's about making a stand." She looked down at our joined hands for a long moment before her gaze shifted back to the stars. "I've spent so much of my life running from my people, from my past. I never thought I'd have a chance to fight. But now, with you, I feel like maybe we can make a difference." I smiled, feeling her words resonate deep inside me. I had always believed that the fight for freedom was worth everything, no matter the cost. But hearing her say those words gave me a new sense of purpose. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about escaping the Voryx. It was about creating something new, something worth living for. "We will," I said firmly. "We'll fight and we'll win, because we're not alone. We have each other and we have the will to change everything." Ramika nodded, her expression softening. "You're right," she said quietly. "We're not alone, and I've never felt more ready to fight." The shuttle began its descent toward the hidden rebel base, its systems humming as it cut through the atmosphere of a barren planet, far from the watchful eyes of the Voryx. As we landed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. We had made it this far, but I knew that the real battle was just beginning. The hatch of the shuttle opened with a hiss, and the cold wind of the outer rim planet greeted us. We stepped out onto the dry, cracked earth, looking around at the small settlement that awaited us. It wasn't much, just a handful of buildings made from scrap metal and stone, surrounded by walls built to keep out prying eyes. But to us, it was everything. It was our chance at a new beginning. As we walked toward the center of the camp, a figure appeared at the entrance. A woman, tall and strong, with a scar running across her cheek, stepped forward. She was dressed in combat gear, and her eyes were sharp as she took in our arrival. I could tell she was sizing us up, weighing our worth, deciding whether we were a threat or an ally. "You must be the ones they've been talking about," she said, her voice low and guarded. Ramika and I exchanged a glance. "We're here to join you," I said. "We're here to fight." The woman didn't smile, but her posture softened slightly. "You've got guts coming here. The Voryx won't let you go easily. You're not just running from them, you're challenging them. But if you're serious, if you want to fight, then we'll help you." I nodded, knowing that this was the first step in something far bigger than just us. This was the beginning of the resistance. This was the start of a movement that could change everything. "Thank you," I said. "We won't back down. We'll fight with everything we have." She gave us a sharp nod, her eyes meeting mine with a new understanding. "Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the rebellion." As we entered the camp, I felt the weight of what was ahead of us settle in. The road would be long, and the Voryx would not give up easily. But as I looked at Ramika, standing beside me, her face filled with resolve, I knew that we had made the right choice. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. It wasn't about running. This was about something bigger, something worth fighting for, and together we would change the galaxy.